Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here, and in this video we'll be reviewing every single class change coming to the Elder Scrolls Online in 2022 for the High Isle chapter. Which classes got buffed, which classes got nerfed, and which class comes out on top when considering all of the most recent changes to class skills and class passives coming soon in Update 34, aka High Isle. I'll be breaking down each class for you in detail so you know exactly where your favorite class stands in ESO's latest expansion, so let's get right into the video. So let's start with a class that needed a lot of love coming into the High Isle chapter in Update 34, and that is the Warden class. I am personally a big fan of this class, and if you're new to ESO, you can find many Warden builds on my channel, from solo to group content to beginner and even PvP builds. And like I said, I am a fan of the Warden class theme, but they have struggled lately, I would say, when it comes to finding their identity and being competitive in many aspects of the game. Wardens are also somewhat gear dependent, meaning unless you put in the time and effort to min-max your build, playing a Warden can be a struggle at times. So where did Wardens land in the High Isle chapter, and did any of those class weaknesses get addressed? Well, yes and no. First, let's talk about buffs, starting with the Bear Pet Ultimate Wild Guardian. This morph has always been lackluster compared to the Magic morph because Warden passives just made the Magic damage bear much better. But now, Wild Guardian deals 10% more damage to ensure it deals similar damage to the Eternal Guardian or Magicka morph. This morph now also converts the damage to bleed damage instead of physical, and each attack applies the hemorrhaging status effect. So if you like playing bleed builds, especially on, let's say, a Stamina Warden, maybe using Cliff Racer or other bleed skills like Dual Wield, this ultimate will now scale even better for you. In addition to this, Deep Fissure now applies Minor Breach as well as Major Breach, so for tank builds or even solo or PvP builds, this ability offers even more strength and utility for your setup, which is a nice change for the class. A few other changes which are still buffs, but less important overall, include the expanded radius for the Frost Cloak ability, increasing the total range to a massive 36 meters, as well as a buff to the Northern Storm ultimate, which makes it a viable option for all Warden builds now instead of just Magicka Wardens, by increasing both weapon and spell damage by 300 for 30 seconds. And the Corrupting Pollen morph now also applies Minor Cowardice to enemies in the area to help it gain some viability in PvE content. Finally, Wardens did see a nerf to their stun ability here, Arctic Blast. This morph now requires enemies to be damaged 5 times in order to be stunned, up from the original 3 times. They also reduced the duration of the stun to 3 seconds, down from 4, though they did increase the duration of the stun stacking to 3 seconds, up from 1. Now, any way you look at this, this still feels like a big nerf for both solo builds and PvP builds on the Warden, because it's going to take so long to proc that stun now, a minimum of 5 seconds, assuming all of your blast strikes actually hit the target. It also seems like the developers tried to balance this by giving the Crystallized Slab skill a single target stun option. Remember, this skill is just pure defensive, so you'll only get the stun if your enemy attacks you first. Overall, I do like the buffs to the Wild Guardian and Deep Fissure here, but the change to Arctic Blast really hurts the Wardens overall, and they still don't have a reliable offensive stun. So not a great patch for Wardens, unfortunately. If you guys do play this class, make sure to let us know what you think of these changes in the comment section below, and whether or not you'll still be playing the class in the High Isle chapter. Speaking of classes that didn't get much in terms of powerful changes this patch, let's talk about the Templar class. Now, my favorite class in ESO is the Templar, but I do admit they are already extremely strong in most situations, including solo and group content in both PvE and PvP. Rightfully so, I don't think they needed much in terms of buffs here moving into Update 34, but it's still a little disappointing that nothing really new or interesting was added to the class this patch. Now, in terms of buffs, the Blazing Shield morph did get an increased radius to 8 meters, up from 6. Power of the Light, that morph did get a nice cost reduction, now 1337 stamina down from 1700. It's going to be nice for sustain. Dark Flare also got reduced cost. Now this costs 2,430 Magicka, down from 2,700. And the Practiced Incantation morph now allows you to move at a reduced rate while channeling it rather than just being unable to move at all, which should be nice for healer builds. Now, as you can see, there's nothing really game-changing here for the Templar, so I'm assuming the devs thought the Templar class was pretty powerful already, which is probably what led us to our next nerf, Templar's Living Dark. This skill got a big nerf, causing the morph's heal to no longer increase with stats, but instead heal for a flat base of 2,000 health each time the effect is triggered. Now for some additional context here, the developer comment says that we're taking away some of the insane values of healing that this ability can have when stacking high stats, and instead taking the safer route with a flat value to ensure any role of Templar can still engage with the skill, but with less powerful results at the high end. Also note that they increased the duration of this morph to 10 seconds up from 4, which is a major duration increase, and they also reduced the cost down to 40.50, down from 43.20. All in all, the Templar class didn't seem to have gained much this patch, and it did lose for some particular builds when it comes to Living Dark, but let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Now there's one more class that we need to talk about, especially when it comes to getting some skills and passives nerfed this patch, and that is the Dragonknight class. I did a full separate video on this one. I'll have a link for that down in the description. But for a bit of context before we get into things, DKs have been extremely strong over the last few patches, especially with improved healing skills from things like Burning Embers and increased sustain through the combustion passive. Also, I feel like the move to the hybrid or the highest offensive stat scaling proved to be very powerful on the Dragonknight class specifically. In fact, this was my #1 pick for hybrids just a little while ago, because the class already had lots of powerful magicka scaling abilities, but now those scale just as effectively on hybrid builds and even on stamina Dragonknight builds. So the class can basically just pick and choose from the most powerful abilities with no downside. Now from a balance standpoint, I do see where some of these changes needed to happen from the developer's standpoint, but it still kind of sucks that DKs were overbuffed so much that they now need to be scaled back. So what are we talking about here? Well, let's start first with the negatives. Engulfing Flames reduced the damage taken bonus on this morph to a maximum of 6%, down from 10%. Definitely a big nerf there, though the total sum of weapon and spell damage that you need is going to remain the same. Here's a big one. Burning Embers reduced the healing value from this morph to up to 50%, down from 100%. What does this mean? Well, you're now going to get half the healing from Burning Embers that you did before. Keep in mind this skill is still extremely powerful and scales well with both stamina and magicka Dragoknights no matter what. In terms of sustain, the combustion passive now has a cooldown of 3 seconds, up from 1/2 second. I think Dragoknights are going to feel this nerf the most out of all of these. Dragoknights were probably over-sustaining a bit thanks to this passive, but that is still a huge nerf. For Coagulating Blood, the heal skill, this morph no longer reduces in cost, but instead increases the healing bonus based on your missing health to 50%, up from 33%. The healing bonus is now a true value rather than an additive value. This one should result in higher healing, especially at lower health, but the increased cost of this skill basically means you won't be able to spam this heal very often, especially if you're playing a stamina-focused DK, so keep that in mind. On the positive side of things, Choking Talons, this morph got its cost reduced to 35.10, down from 40.50. The Dragonknight Armor morph, Hardened Armor, had its damage shield size increased by 24%, that's pretty good. And Fragmented Shield, they increased the duration of Major Mending from this morph to nearly 7 seconds at base, up from 5 seconds, and this means it will be even longer lasting with Dragonknight passives. So all in all, a fairly mixed bag for the Dragonknight class. DKs will definitely need to learn to play with reduced healing and reduced sustain as compared to update 33, but also remember that due to hybrid scaling, you can pick any morph you want, so spreading out your morph choices to include both magicka and stamina skills regardless of your build should also be a big help when it comes to sustain. On to some more positive class balance changes next, and specifically the Necromancer class. Necro fans will be glad to know that there's nothing but buffs here, and some interesting changes overall that can open up new playstyles. Now first, my favorite change for the Necromancer is the update to the Ruinous Scythe morph. This morph now deals bleed damage instead of physical damage. The morph now applies the Hemorrhaging status effect, and the morph now sets all enemies off balance on hit rather than on every third cast. I know from my own experience that this morph was a little bit lackluster, and having to cast it 3 times, especially to get that off balance to proc, was really annoying. So I do like this change a lot, and I'll be experimenting with this one on some of my new Necro builds. In addition to this, Mystic Siphon now increases your health, magicka, and stamina recovery by up to 150 while it's active, rather than just restoring magicka. Beckoning Armor now pulls in targets every 2 seconds instead of every 3 seconds. That's a nice buff. The Hexproof morph has been reduced in cost to 1670 at its final rank, down from 1880. And Mortal Coil, this morph now restores up to 1020 magicka and stamina over its duration instead of just stamina. So overall here, nothing massive if you play a Necromancer, but the increased sustain from those tether abilities is going to be a nice benefit to playing the class. And the Ruinous Scythe changes look pretty interesting as well. If you play a Necromancer, let us know what you think of these changes down in the comments section, and if there's anything else you think the class needs to be more effective. Now these last two classes that we're going to review got the best changes for the High Isle chapter in my opinion, and we're starting with another of my favorite classes, the Nightblade. Now the Nightblade got a few updates here which aren't really groundbreaking, especially for group content. But for solo builds, these are actually going to be very nice. For example, the Ambush morph now grants 10 seconds of Empower, that's up from 3 seconds, and it's also going to provide the Minor Berserk buff at the same time. This is great because generally you could only get that Minor Berserk if you consistently flank enemies using Camouflage Hunter, which is going to be hard to do when you're playing solo PvE content, so I do like this change a lot. Also, the Refreshing Path morph now finally does something other than that relatively weak healing and speed effect. It's now going to also grant you minor endurance and minor intellect. That's increasing your stamina recovery and magic recovery for 4 seconds each tick. That is a nice change as well. Now this one is interesting. Drain Power, which is basically the skill Sap Essence and also Power Extraction. Those morphs now have an increased duration for Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. Now 30 seconds up from 20 seconds. This is to make up for the fact that they require a target. You also need to be in melee range for those effects to go off. Plus, the Power Extraction morph, which is the Stamina morph, now also grants the caster Minor Courage for 30 seconds upon dealing damage. This gives you about 200, I think it's 215 maybe, weapon and spell damage as a buff, which again is not huge, but it's going to be nice for solo builds where you can't easily get that buff otherwise. Finally, Piercing Mark had its duration increased to 60 seconds, up from 30 seconds, which is definitely going to be nice for debuffing enemy armor and not having to worry about recasting that one. So if you play a Nightblade, and especially in solo content, I think you're going to be pretty happy with the High Isle chapter. You'll be getting quite a lot of extra buffs this patch, which is really nice. I am definitely looking forward to it. And finally, we have what I believe is going to be the strongest, most flexible class this patch, and that is the Sorcerer. Why are Sorcerers looking so good for the High Isle chapter? Well, you're going to have a lot of increased flexibility and options in terms of how you set up your build, particularly for stamina or hybrid Sorcerer setups. First, there is one of my favorite changes in history for the Sorcerer class, and that is the Crystal Fragments morph now activates off any non-ultimate ability cast, rather than only magicka costing skills. They did also reduce the proc chance slightly here, but keep in mind this skill can now be used on any Sorcerer build in the game, whether you're a stamina, magicka Sorcerer, or a hybrid setup. And it's going to be so much easier to proc for that extra reduced cost and bonus damage. This skill, I think, coupled with Haunting Curse on the Stamina Sorcerer, is going to offer some serious burst potential. And speaking of burst, the other morph of this skill is also more powerful this patch. The Crystal Weapon morph now causes your next 2 light or heavy attacks to deal bonus damage instead of just your next attack. Crystal Weapon is also going to have an increased cost, but again, that's accounting for the fact that you're going to get off 2 casts of this ability for the price of 1, which again, I think is a pretty cool idea. They also increase the duration of the skill to 6 seconds, up from 4, to improve the accessibility of the skill's charges for heavy attack builds. Definitely looking forward to this one. In addition to that, Summon Charge Atronach, the Storm Atronach ultimate, that area of effect damage is now going to always apply the Concussed status effect, which is really nice. Endless Fury also has a reduced cost, 2,160 magicka now, down from 2,400, to help reinforce the idea that you're able to endlessly cast this ability. And finally, the Energy Overload Ultimate Morph now restores up to 1,200 magicka and stamina rather than just magicka. So again, hybrid sorcerers and stamina sorcerers will benefit a lot from these changes, and I cannot wait to try them out on my own builds this patch. With that said, those are the major class balance changes coming soon in the High Isle chapter. I don't think we'll see anything new on release day itself, but if we do, I will, as always, break that down for you right here on the channel. As always, thank you all for watching, and let us know what you think of these changes down in the comment section below. Did your class improve or not? And are you looking forward to any of these changes? Hey everybody, just a quick note that we are continuing to update our members-only builds right here on HGM. These include a lot of unique and off-meta builds that you won't find anywhere else, including a brand new update for our Vampire Magicka Templar build with over 13,000 possible spell damage. Yes, I said that right, 13,000 spell damage on a Templar, with multiple ways to reach that number, including a variety of set options. This is just one of many unique build videos you can unlock with our Tier 2 channel membership called the Elite Squad, so if that sounds interesting to you, or you just want to see what other unique build options we put together, click on that join button down below for more information, or click on the members link in this video's description. As always, big thanks to all of our channel members here at HGM who help make this channel possible. I could not do this without you guys, so thanks again. Thanks to all of you for watching. I hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.